Chapter 17. Isabella wasn't sure what she'd expected from an underground club called Feral, but it was nothing like she'd imagined. She'd expected something grimy and hidden, perhaps with ancient vampire movie aesthetics, iron sconces, velvet drapes, and faux cobwebs. Instead, it appeared to be an upscale cocktail lounge in Buckhead. The main floor was all Edison bulbs and craft cocktails, catering to Atlanta's young professionals who laughed and flirted, oblivious to the supernatural world pulsing beneath their feet. The air smelled of artisanal bitters, expensive perfume, and the particular scent of privileged youth, confidence with notes of inherited wealth. But the basement was another world entirely. "Stay close to me," Isabella instructed Damon as they approached the unmarked door beside the restrooms. The hallway narrowed here, dimly lit with sconces that cast more shadows than illumination. She kept her voice low and steady, hiding the nervousness fluttering in her stomach as she repeated the instructions Mikhail had quickly given her over the phone. "Don't stare, don't ask questions, and whatever you do, don't show fear." "Too late for that last one," Damon muttered, but he squared his shoulders nonetheless, smoothing his tie in a gesture that seemed poignantly human and vulnerable in this context. The silk caught the low light with a subtle sheen. Isabella pressed her palm against what looked like an ordinary section of wall. Sleek, dark-stained wood that matched the bar's upscale aesthetic. A hidden panel slid open with a soft whir, revealing a palm scanner glowing with blue light that painted her skin in otherworldly hues. The veins beneath her skin became momentarily visible like a map of blue rivers. "Have you been here before?" Damon asked, eyes widening. His voice pitched higher than normal. His breath fogged slightly in the suddenly cooler air that emanated from the hidden passage. "Number. But Mikhail told me how to find it and gave me access." She placed her hand on the scanner, her heart pounding as the blue light traced the lines of her palm. An odd intimacy struck her at this moment. Mikhail had added her to his security system, given her entry to his world. The scanner's surface was cool and smooth against her skin, vibrating slightly with hidden technology. The strange sensation in her stomach was just nerves, not regret for bringing Damon into this world, she told herself. She was not anticipating seeing Mikhail again, just professional concern for Harper. A soft chime sounded, melodious and vaguely ancient, and the unmarked door swung inward on silent hinges, revealing a steep staircase disappearing into darkness below. Music pulsed from below, not the techno beat she'd expected, but something primal and rhythmic. Drums and strings, creating a hypnotic atmosphere that seemed to bypass conscious thought and speak directly to the brainstem. The air rising from below was different, older, more affluent, carrying scents that Isabella's human nose couldn't identify, but registered as fundamentally feral. They descended into the heart of supernatural Atlanta, at least where the cool kids hung out. Small blue lights embedded in the risers illuminated the staircase, creating the impression of descending through twilight into a deeper darkness. The stone steps were worn smooth in the center, testimony to countless feet over what must have been centuries. Isabella's hand trailed along the wall for balance, the stone cool and slightly damp beneath her fingers, its texture suggesting age well beyond Atlanta's official history. The club was a vast space, much larger than seemed possible given the building above. Ancient stone walls suggested they were in a section of the city's original underground. perhaps even predating the Civil War. Water trickled somewhere in the distance, a constant background music beneath the more deliberate rhythms pulsing from hidden speakers. Vaulted ceilings disappeared into shadow, above scattered crystal chandeliers that cast a warm, amber glow over everything, creating pockets of light and stretches of comfortable darkness. The air was cooler down here, carrying strange scents, incense, aged leather, something metallic and sharp, and beneath it all a musky animal scent that made the hair on Isabella's arms rise. The patrons were diverse. Some appeared fully human, others sported subtle hints of the otherworldly, eyes that caught the light wrong, reflecting gold or green when they turned. Movements too fluid to be natural, as if joints moved in ways human anatomy shouldn't permit. Features that shifted subtly if you looked too long, like photographs viewed underwater. In a darkened corner, Isabella was sure she saw a group with reptilian scales gleaming on their forearms, their laughter revealing teeth too sharp for comfort. Their mirth was oddly musical, like wind chimes made of bone. "Holy shit," Damon breathed, his eyes wide as saucers, darting from one impossible sight to another. His skin had taken on a grey undertone in the club's unusual lighting. Holy actual shit. Isabella nudged him sharply with her elbow. "Remember what I said about the staring?" she hissed, keeping a pleasant, neutral expression fixed as a woman with silver-streaked hair and pupils like a cat's. Nodded to them from behind the curved mahogany bar. The countertop gleamed with a patina that spoke of centuries of polishing by countless elbows and spilled drinks. A woman separated from the crowd and approached them, moving with predatory grace through the sea of bodies. Tall and lithe, with auburn hair that fell in waves past her shoulders and intelligent eyes that assessed them with calculated efficiency, she moved with the confident precision of a soldier. Multiple scars marked her visible skin, one tracing her bicep and another disappearing beneath the collar of her fitted black shirt. Badges of honor rather than flaws, worn without self-consciousness. The smell of wild herbs and something metallic, blood, clung to her, mixed with clean sweat and leather. Isabella Santos. It wasn't a question. Her voice was low, slightly raspy, as if she wasn't accustomed to using it often. Each syllable carried the subtle accent of someone for whom English was fluent, but not first. Eastern European, perhaps Russian. "Good to see you again." Her nostrils flared slightly as she scented the air between them. A subtle movement Isabella would have missed if she hadn't been watching for it. Her gaze shifted to Damon. "And this is Damon Montgomery," he said, stepping forward with what Isabella recognized as his courtroom charm smile, which usually worked on female jurors. "And you are stunning." Katerina's smile was all teeth, sharp and predatory. "Flattered. But I'd chew you up and spit you out before you knew what hit you, little lawyer." Her tone was pleasant and conversational, which somehow made the words more threatening. Damon's smile faltered as he took an involuntary step back. "He's the one your people have been following," Isabella supplied quickly, stepping slightly in front of him, in a protective gesture she hadn't consciously planned. "He's with me." Katerina's eyes narrowed, the green flashing with something not quite human, a reflective quality that caught the ambient light and magnified it. "Mikhail said nothing about a second human joining you." The words carried a warning beneath their simplicity. Her scent changed subtly, taking on a sharper edge that made Isabella's instincts scream danger. "Damon is under my protection," Isabella said firmly, meeting the woman's gaze without flinching, despite the instinct screaming at her to look away, bare her throat, and acknowledge Katerina's apparent dominance. The air between them seemed to crackle with tension, making the fine hairs on Isabella's nape stand up. "He's been targeted because of his association with me. I won't leave him unprotected." Something like respect flickered across Katerina's face. A subtle reassessment. "Very well, but he's your responsibility." She turned abruptly, not waiting for acknowledgement. "Follow me. Mikhail is waiting." They wound through the crowd, which parted subtly before Katerina. Not obviously enough to be noticeable to casual observation, but unmistakable to Isabella's heightened awareness. People shifted aside like water around a stone. Conversations paused mid-sentence, and glasses lowered from lips, creating a soft symphony of movement and deference. The scents changed as they moved deeper into the club. Different groups carried different signatures. Some smelled of forest and earth, others of ozone and electricity, and still others of spices Isabella couldn't name. Isabella noticed how other patrons, werewolves and otherwise, lowered their eyes or tilted their heads as they passed, exposing necks in gestures so ingrained they probably weren't even conscious of them. Deference to the Alpha's second in command. Damon stayed close behind Isabella, his warmth at her back a reminder of her human connections. "Is everyone here?" "You know," he whispered, his breath warm against her ear, carrying the scent of the peppermint he always chewed when nervous. His shoulder bumped against hers occasionally as he tried to avoid contact with the strangers around them. "No," Katerina answered without looking back, her hearing more acute than Isabella had accounted for. The sound carried perfectly despite the music and conversation surrounding them. Many species share this territory, under Mikhail's protection. The casual confirmation of multiple supernatural species sent a shiver down Isabella's spine that she tried to hide. Her skin prickled with goosebumps beneath her silk blouse, a physical reaction to knowledge her mind was still struggling to accept fully. Werewolves were just the beginning, then. What else existed in this shadow world beneath Atlanta's surface? They approached a raised section at the far end of the club. A curved booth dominated the space, upholstered in rich burgundy leather and positioned to overlook the entire establishment. The perfect vantage point for someone who needed to monitor all activity. The leather was worn to a buttery softness that spoke of age and use, though not a single crack marred its surface. Standing before it, deep in conversation with two men who radiated barely controlled aggression in the set of their shoulders and the tension in their hands, was Mikhail. He looked different here, more powerful, more dangerous. He wore simple clothes, dark jeans, and a black silk shirt that emphasized his broad shoulders, but carried himself with unmistakable authority, with his feet planted firmly and his gestures minimal and precise. His scent reached Isabella even at a distance. That now familiar blend of cedar and something wild, underscored with a note of power that defied description, but registered as a physical sensation low in her abdomen. His usual careful charm was absent, replaced by a raw intensity that quickened Isabella's pulse, the alpha in his lair. He looked up as they approached, the conversation cutting off mid-sentence. His eyes found hers immediately, warming from ice to lightning instantly. Recognition and something deeper flickered across his features before his expression settled into careful neutrality. The air between them seemed to compress, and the heat suddenly made breathing difficult. Isabella. It was just her name, but his voice felt like a caress, intimate despite the public setting. His unique timbre sent a cascade of sensation down her spine that she hoped wasn't noticeable to the others. The two men he'd been speaking with turned to look at her, their expressions guarded. One, tall and dark-skinned with elegant dreadlocks tied back from a face that could have belonged on magazine covers, sniffed the air subtly and raised an eyebrow at Mikhail, a silent question in the gesture. His eyes flashed amber momentarily, catching the light like a predator's in darkness. "Later, Ezekiel," Mikhail said, dismissing the men with a slight nod that brooked no argument despite its gentleness. The air stirred as they moved past, carrying their scents, one of mountain pine and clean sweat, the other of sandalwood and something metallic. They retreated, though not before casting skeptical glances at Isabella and Damon, assessment in their eyes that made Isabella feel like prey being sized up. Katerina positioned herself at the entrance to the raised area, effectively becoming a sentinel. Arms crossed over her chest, feet shoulder-width apart. The leather of her jacket creaked softly as she settled into position. "The human brought another of her kind," she said to Mikhail, gesturing toward Damon with a tilt of her chin. "I see that." Mikhail's gaze moved to Damon, who managed not to visibly recoil to his credit, though Isabella felt him tense beside her. "Damon Montgomery, I presume. Isabella speaks highly of you." Damon cleared his throat, the sound unnaturally loud to Isabella's ears. The scent of his nervous sweat intensified. Thank you, sir." "Alpha, sir?" The formality slipped out automatically, a deference to authority that made Mikhail's lips quirk slightly. A hint of amusement played around Mikhail's mouth, softening his features momentarily. "I'm not quite that old-fashioned." He gestured to the booth with a fluid movement. "Please sit, both of you." As they slid in, the booth's material released a subtle scent of history. Aged leather, tobacco smoke, expensive cologne, and perfumes from countless occupants. Isabella was painfully aware of Mikhail's thigh brushing against hers as she sat, radiating heat that seemed higher than human normal. Damon took the opposite side, perching on the edge as if prepared to bolt at any moment, his left knee bouncing in a nervous rhythm that made the table vibrate slightly. "You've had a difficult day," Mikhail said, signaling to a server who materialized instantly at his subtle gesture. The young woman appeared in their space so suddenly that it seemed magical, as though she'd stepped from the shadows themselves. "Drinks first, then we talk." The statement carried the certainty of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. The server, a young woman with unusual lavender eyes that seemed to reflect the light too strongly, like a nocturnal animal's, took their orders without writing them down and disappeared into the crowd with silent efficiency. Her movements were too smooth to be entirely human, and each step was precisely placed. "The chief prosecutor had me put on administrative leave," Isabella said without preamble, the words still bitter on her tongue despite her attempts to focus on the larger issues. The table surface beneath her fingertips was smooth with age, warm to the touch despite the cool air of the club. "Rogers is corrupt. He's connected to Victor Aldrich." Mikhail's expression darkened. The temperature around him seemed to drop several degrees, but nothing changed. The leather of the booth creaked slightly as he shifted, his body tensing like a predator preparing to strike. "Are you certain?" Each word was precise, measured, and vibrating with contained energy. Isabella pulled the envelope from her bag and spread several photographs on the table, arranging them with methodical care. "These are some of the images the informant gave me at Coleridge Yard." Mikhail examined the images, his face hardening into something cold and dangerous. A low growl, so quiet it was almost subliminal, rumbled from his chest, vibrating through the booth. The sound raised primitive alarms in Isabella's hindbrain, a reminder of predators in darkness that humans had evolved to fear. "Victor has been busy." His finger traced the edge of the photo showing Rogers with Victor, the gesture containing so much restrained anger that Isabella held her breath. "That's not all," Isabella continued, finding comfort in the familiar rhythm of presenting evidence, building a case. The music in the clubs seemed to recede, creating a bubble of silence around their conversation. "A friend of mine on the police force, Detective Harper, is missing. The City Hall archives clerk was murdered, and they're framing Harper for it." "Eliminating your allies," Mikhail murmured, his voice a dangerous purr that seemed to bypass her ears and resonate directly in her chest. "Isolating you." His eyes flicked to her face, studying her with an intensity that made her feel transparent. "Making you vulnerable." "Mikhail," Katerina interrupted from her post, her posture shifting subtly to alertness. Like old paper and ink, a new scent drifted toward them, mixed with night air and feathers. "The raven's approaching." Isabella followed his gaze to see a slender woman in Victorian-inspired clothing gliding toward them. The heavy black silk of her dress rustled softly with each step, the sound oddly like whispering voices. Her movements were unnaturally smooth, as if she floated rather than walked, black skirts whispering against the floor. Her skin was unnaturally pale, her movements bird-like and precise, giving the impression she was perpetually about to take flight. Long black hair hung in a straight curtain down her back, contrasting starkly with her bloodless complexion. The air around her seemed darker, as if she carried shadows. Her eyes seemed too big for her face. "Not now, Lenore," Mikhail said firmly, authority resonating in his voice. The command seemed to vibrate between them, carrying weight beyond the mere words. The woman stopped, head tilting at an unsettling angle that reminded Isabella of nature documentaries showing predatory birds considering their options for dinner. The movement was too sharp and sudden to be human, accompanied by a soft cracking sound that might have been popping joints. "The mooncaller is missing," she said in a voice like rustling paper. The sound seemed to come from all around them, rather than her lips, which barely moved. "And the wolves circle each other while the shepherd sleeps." She turned her starless black eyes to Isabella, the total absence of whites or iris making them look like twin voids that seemed to draw in light rather than reflect it. "The Lady of Justice walks between worlds, now, neither here nor there. But blood calls to blood," Lenore continued, her voice like dried leaves skittering across stone. Isabella felt a chill run through her. Lady of Justice? Was this strange woman referring to her? The legal profession had long used that symbol, and Isabella had dedicated her career to its pursuit. She glanced at Mikhail, searching his face for confirmation or denial. But his expression remained carefully neutral, revealing nothing of his thoughts. His eyes were fixed on Lenore, and his jaw was set in a tight line. When they were alone, Isabella made a mental note to ask him about it later. For now, she would file away this cryptic statement like evidence in an ongoing, potentially significant case requiring further investigation. "Thank you, Lenore," Mikhail said with strained patience, a muscle working in his jaw. The leather seat protested softly as he shifted his weight. "We'll speak later." The woman nodded and drifted away, disappearing into the crowd as if dissolving into mist. A cool breeze followed in her wake, carrying the scent of night air and something like old lace. "What was that?" Damon asked, his voice higher than usual, knuckles white where he gripped the table's edge. His pulse was visible in his throat, racing beneath his skin. "A raven," Katerina supplied from behind them, her tone matter of fact. The leather of her jacket creaked as she shrugged her shoulders. "They see things. Possible futures. It's rarely straightforward." Isabella fought a sudden shiver that ran the length of her spine. "Moving on," she said firmly. "Lady of Justice, between worlds. We need a plan. With Harper missing and me discredited, there's no one left in law enforcement we can trust, except for Damon, who they'll be watching closely. But we have evidence connecting Victor to the murders and corruption at the highest levels of city government." Mikhail nodded, his expression thoughtful, finger-tapping against the photo of Rogers again. "The challenge is going to be proving Victor is behind the murders without exposing our world." "Exactly. If we reveal what Victor is, what you are, it risks exposing every supernatural creature in Atlanta." Isabella met his gaze directly, acknowledging the enormous balance they needed to strike. The warmth of his thigh against hers seemed to intensify, a point of heat that anchored her to the moment. "Mass panic, witch hunts, government involvement. It could be catastrophic." The server returned with their drinks. Whiskey for Isabella and Mikhail, and an herbal concoction for Damon that swirled with unexpected colors in the amber light. Crystal clinked softly against the wooden table as she set down each glass with precise movements. Damon sniffed his drink suspiciously, nostrils flaring before taking a tentative sip. "Oh," he said, surprise, causing his eyebrows to rise, color returning to his face for the first time since they'd entered the club. "That's actually good." The liquid in his glass shifted colors slightly as he moved it, catching the light in ways that suggested it wasn't entirely natural. Katerina snorted from her post, the sound surprisingly human. "Margot makes the best calming teas in the city. You look like you needed it. And the gin." Isabella took a sip of her whiskey, letting the burn center her, anchor her to the moment. The alcohol traced a path of fire down her throat to bloom warmly in her stomach. Better than she was used to. Complex notes of oak and vanilla beneath the familiar fire, with a smoky finish that lingered pleasantly on her palate. Of course, Mikhail would have the good stuff. "We need to find Harper. He might be in danger or have evidence that could help us." She set her glass down, leaving a perfect lipstick mark on the crystal rim. The heavy-bottomed tumbler made a solid sound against the wood, punctuating her statement. "I have people start looking," Mikhail said, his fingers tracing patterns on the table's surface that Isabella suspected weren't random. The slight scratch of his nail against the wood created a rhythm that seemed to synchronize with the distant music. But Victor knows the city as well as I do. If he has Harper, he'll be well hidden. Or dead by now. Isabella swallowed back against the lump in her throat. I've known Harper as long as I've worked at City Hall, and I suddenly have a lot of free time on my hands. I will help look too. She needed to do something to help her friend, or she'd go mad waiting. You need to stay safe, Mikhail countered, his hand moving to cover hers on the table, warm and solid. The unexpected touch sent a jolt through her system, as if her body recognized something her mind was still processing. You're now visibly isolated, publicly disgraced. You're vulnerable, exactly as Victor planned. I'm not hiding while he continues to hurt people, Isabella insisted. Hearing the steel return to her voice, the prosecutor who'd faced down death threats from gang leaders. Despite her low volume, the club's unusual acoustics clearly conveyed her words. She didn't pull her hand away, though. I won't be sidelined in my own investigation. Mikhail's eyes flashed red momentarily, a lightning-quick change that made Damon inhale audibly from across the table. The crystal in his hand clinked against his teeth. You're not listening. You're a target, Isabella. He wants to lure you out somewhere unprotected. I heard you, Isabella countered, the challenge in her voice surprising even herself. The air between them seemed to thicken with tension, carrying an electric charge that raised goosebumps along her arms. But hiding won't stop him. We need to work together. Exactly how good a friend is this Harper? Mikhail asked, a growl beginning to form. Damon cleared his throat, the sound pulling both their gazes away from what had about to become an intense standoff. Not to interrupt the intense moment you two have going on, but I seem to have an invitation to dance. Would that be all right? Isabella looked over to see a petite woman with platinum blonde hair and large luminous eyes standing near their booth. She was tiny, not even 5 feet, with delicate features and an ethereal quality that made her appear almost doll-like. Her dress seemed to shimmer with its own light, catching and reflecting the club's amber glow in impossible ways. That's Ivy, Katerina said, her tone carrying a note of warning. She's mostly harmless, but I can speak for myself, Ivy interrupted, her voice with a musical quality harmonizing with the club's background music. She smiled at Damon, revealing teeth that were slightly too sharp to be human. I promised to return him in one piece. Mostly. Isabella felt alarm bells going off in her head. Something about the woman's too bright smile, the way the air around her sparkled with barely visible motes of light, screamed supernatural danger despite her harmless appearance. Damon, I don't think... Isabella began. Oh, come on, Izzy, Damon said, already sliding out of the booth with the liquid courage of whatever was in his glass. His colour had returned completely, and there was a relaxed confidence in his movements that Isabella had never seen before. You two clearly need to have some kind of intense conversation, and I could use some normalcy. Dancing counts as normal, right? Define normal, Mikhail muttered. But he didn't object, as Ivy extended a delicate hand to Damon. Just one dance, Ivy promised, her large eyes fixed on Damon with predatory focus that reminded Isabella uncomfortably of a cat watching a mouse. I'll keep him safe. Something in her tone made Isabella's skin crawl, but Damon was already taking her hand, allowing himself to be led toward the dance floor where other couples moved to the hypnotic rhythm. The strange herbal drink had affected his judgment more than Isabella had realized. Either that, or Ivy's waifish beauty. "Keep an eye on them," Mikhail instructed Katerina quietly, though not quietly enough to escape Isabella's hearing. Katerina nodded and melted into the crowd, moving with predatory grace to maintain visual contact with Damon and his ethereal dance partner. "A pixie?" Isabella asked, watching Ivy press against Damon on the dance floor, her movements liquid and mesmerizing. "Half pixie," Mikhail corrected. "Her mother was human. It makes her less dangerous than full-blooded fae, but..." He shrugged, the gesture elegant despite his obvious tension. Pixies are known for their mischief and their ability to cloud human judgment. Isabella felt a spike of protective anger. You let him go with her knowing that. "He's an adult who made his own choice," Mikhail said reasonably, though his eyes never left the dance floor. "And Katerina will intervene if necessary. Besides," his gaze returned to hers, intense and burning, "we do need to talk." Isabella watched as Ivy moved against Damon with fluid, hypnotic grace. The half-pixie was undeniably beautiful. Her platinum hair caught the amber light like spun silver, and her diminutive form moved with an otherworldly sensuality that made even Isabella appreciate her ethereal appeal. Damon's face was relaxed in a way she hadn't seen in weeks. His usual tension melted away as he matched Ivy's rhythm, his hands resting on her waist with growing confidence. A pang of guilt twisted in Isabella's chest as she watched her assistant laugh at something Ivy whispered in his ear, his head thrown back with genuine pleasure. When was the last time she'd seen Damon truly enjoy himself? Before the stalking started, before she'd dragged him into this supernatural nightmare that had turned both their lives upside down. He'd been looking over his shoulder for days, losing sleep over dangers he couldn't even name. Maybe Mikhail was right. Damon was an adult and deserved a moment of fun, a brief escape from the fear consuming them both. Even if his dance partner wasn't entirely human, she seemed harmless enough in this setting. Isabella felt the protective tension leave her shoulders as she watched Damon spin Ivy in a surprisingly graceful move for someone who usually claimed he had 2 left feet. He looked carefree and happy for this moment, lost in music, attraction, and the simple pleasure of holding a beautiful woman. She slowly became aware of Mikhail studying her silently. The booth suddenly felt much smaller with just the 2 of them, the leather seat forcing them closer together. Isabella was acutely aware of his thigh against hers, the heat radiating from his body, the scent of cedar and wildness that seemed to envelop her. "About what Lenore said," Isabella began, trying to find a safer subject, but Mikhail held up a hand. "Later. First, we need to discuss your safety. You can't go back to your apartment. Victor's people will be watching it. We're at too far a point for me to feel comfortable that a guard or 2 will be enough to stop him if he wants you." "I'm not abandoning my life." "Your life won't matter if you're dead," Mikhail interrupted, his voice carrying a rough edge that made something profound in Isabella's chest respond with unexpected heat. "Victor has spent weeks setting this up, isolating you, discrediting you, removing your allies. This is a chess game, and you're the target. He's after you." Before Isabella could respond, there was the sound of a significant crash near the dance floor, catching their attention. Raised voices, the sound of raining glass, And then Katerina's sharp whistle, a signal that cut through the club's music like a blade. Isabella looked toward the dance floor and felt her blood turn to ice. Damon was gone. Ivy stood alone in the center of the dance floor, her ethereal beauty now looking distinctly predatory as she smiled at something beyond Isabella's line of sight. Where is he? Isabella was out of the booth before she decided to move, and Mikhail was behind her. Ivy's laugh was like silver bells, beautiful and terrible. He wanted some air. Such a lovely night for a walk. Outside? Isabella's voice pitched higher. You let him go outside alone? Oh, he wasn't alone, Ivy said, tilting her head at that unsettling bird-like angle. Isabella was beginning to associate with supernatural creatures. Such nice men offered to escort him. They smelled like, what's the word? Wolves. But wrong somehow. Sick wolves. Mikhail's growl was audible this time, making several nearby patrons step back instinctively. Victor's revenants. Isabella's gaze swept the club until she spotted Katerina near the bar, blood trickling from a cut on her temple as she issued rapid-fire orders to club security. One of the crystal chandeliers lay shattered on the floor nearby, its destruction creating the perfect distraction. Even with her supernatural reflexes, Katerina couldn't have prevented what she couldn't see coming. The back exit. Katerina appeared at his elbow, slightly out of breath. They went out through the alley, 3 of them, carrying something reeked of vervain and silver to mask his scent. Isabella felt the world tilt. Victor had her friend, her colleague, who'd only gotten involved because of his association with her. This is my fault, she said, the words tasting like ash. I brought him here. I made him a target. No. Mikhail's hand was on her shoulder, solid and grounding. This is Victor's fault. And we're going to get Damon and Harper back. His eyes were red now. Not the momentary flash from before, but a steady burning glow that spoke of barely contained rage. Around them, the club's atmosphere had shifted. Conversations died as supernatural senses picked up on their alpha's fury. The very air seemed to vibrate with dangerous energy. But first, Mikhail continued, his voice carrying absolute authority, you're going to let me keep you safe, because you can't help Damon if you're taken captive too. Isabella looked around the club, at the faces turned toward them with a mixture of concern and anticipation. At Ivy, who was still smiling her sharp-toothed smile, at the stairs leading up to the everyday world where the rules made sense. Damon was out there somewhere, in the hands of creatures that could tear him apart without breaking a sweat. And it was her fault for bringing him into this world. What do you need me to do? She asked, meeting Mikhail's burning gaze. His smile was all predator, beautiful and terrifying. Trust me,